Back in 1987, an amazing success story of a billion-dollar franchise was built on the back of a mere toy line. But when they attempted to turn the successful IP into a movie franchise, it crashed and burned in horrific fashion at the box office. It not only failed to make money or receive critical praise, it became one of the several final nails in the coffin of an infamous movie studio, and one of the most memorably silly motion picture attempts of an entire decade. But when it comes to nostalgia and unforgettably weird memories of a bygone era, it still holds all the power. Come with us to Eternia, or, a random street in California, for the wild story of what the happened to Masters of the Universe. In 1976, toy company Mattel balked at the $750,000 price tag that came along with licensing the Star Wars action figures. They decided to instead create their own insanely popular franchise from the toy up. They glued one of their other action figure properties, a Big Jim figure, into a fighting stance, added clay, and had plaster casts made of a character they would call He-Man, a name purposefully given to the muscular action hero so that they could plug him into any kind of franchise story that they could dream up. By the mid-80s, the toys, animated TV show, and comics that followed made He-Man and the Masters of the Universe a merchandising empire. Of course, a movie was the next logical step. That's what you do with popular things. You make a movie. Who better to partner with than Cannon Films, the studio that brought you the prestigious Silent Night Deadly Night, American Ninja 2, and about 1,000 other wild genre films made quick and cheap but marketed as huge events. Cannon saw Masters as their opportunity to take the leap into big-time blockbuster territory, envisioning a large-scale fantasy adventure that would rival any Hollywood release. Then they looked in the bank account.
This magnificent feast here represents the last of the petty cash.
The studio hired the Dark Crystal and The Muppet Show writer David Odell to craft a tale full of action and adventure that understood the minds of the kids that had been buying the products in mass scale. In an effort to wield the mythical world of He-Man to the challenge budget of Cannon Films, it was decided to take most of the script from Eternia to Earth. It was simply too expensive to bring Eternia to life for very long, and rent was cheaper here, back then at least. While earlier versions of the script were closer to the animated series, in the final script, Skeletor and his cronies would chase He-Man and his allies through a dimensional portal, leading them to America using a tool called the Cosmic Key. Though no fans wanted to see a Masters of the Universe movie take place next to a 7-Eleven, every kid can remember wanting whatever the hell this contraption was sitting in their toy chest next to their Duck Hunter Zapper pistol. It was a beautiful concoction that grabbed our attention and was relatively cheap to make. Regardless, the fantastical sci-fi adventure had been turned into a fish-out-of-water story that further removed it from what audiences were paying for in the first place. Not to mention the absence of Battle Cat and Orko, who just didn't have the money or special effects to pull off on the big screen. I guess nobody had the balls to spray paint a tiger green. Hey, I bet Tom Cruise would have done it. For director, Cannon would look to the talents of Gary Goddard. Sure, he had never directed a feature film before in his entire life, but he did have experience in helping design theme parks and live entertainment, which makes so much sense. Masters of the Universe may not feel like the He-Man movie that we had in mind, but by God did it feel like a possibly mushroom-induced trip to Universal Studios, Indiana. Far more important for this specific project than director, or even writer, was the question of who would play He-Man. It could make or break the entire project. So who better than the guy who just came close to breaking Rocky Balboa in one of the most beloved movies of the 80s? Ivan Drago. Many knew Dolph Lundgren at the time as the Russian of few words who had killed Apollo Creed in Rocky IV, but in truth, Lundgren was a gentleman and a scholar who spoke 5 languages and has a master's degree in chemical engineering. Lundgren was receiving a lot of attention after his role in Rocky IV, but they weren't the type of roles that he was necessarily psyched about taking on. It's easy to see he was being typecast, and despite speaking numerous languages, there was still a glaring language barrier to overcome when it came to his English. Though it wasn't the opportunity to show off his intellect that he was necessarily looking for, he saw Masters of the Universe as his best option because of its box office bankability. It was also reminiscent of a role that had helped break out Arnold Schwarzenegger in Conan the Barbarian. but it wouldn't be easy. The already huge Lundgren beefed up to a bigger than he'd ever been at 250 pounds, and prepared himself to not only embody a literal master of the universe, but a dude who would be walking around pretty much wearing a G-string for 6 months. It wasn't all bad though. Lundgren remembered a hot woman coming up to him while eating a popsicle and flirting with him. It turned out to be Madonna. He sent flowers, but he never heard back. It was clear he had the power, even if he barely had any speaking lines in his own movie. Those lines went to the talents of Frank Langella, cast as Skeletor. Langella, a respected stage and film actor known for his dramatic roles, wasn't sticking his nose up in the air despite the less than distinguished aroma around the film. The actor was ecstatic to play the role of Skeletor based on his son's enthusiasm for the property, so he gave it his all, even researching dictators and Shakespearean villains to color his performance. It's easily the best performance of the film and turned out to be one of the esteemed actor's most beloved roles of his career, despite the annoying makeup and costumes that he endured while filming. Actress Meg Foster brought her traffic-stopping blue eyes and great line delivery to the role of Evil Lynn, Skeletor's second-in-command, and favorite face to pet like a total creeper. Long before Friends or Scream fame, Courtney Cox took on one of the first roles of her career as Earthling Julie Winston. Actor Robert Duncan McNeil played her affable musician boyfriend Kevin before moving on in his career to become a successful TV series director of shows like Chuck and Star Trek Voyager. Backing up He-Man in their hero's journey would be John Cypher as the mustache strongman Man-at-Arms alongside the beautiful Chelsea Field as Tila. Willow and legend actor Billy Barty took on the role of locksmith, inventor, and chicken bucket stealer Gwildor, who was a new addition to the Master's lore, as was Back to the Future and Top Gun's James Tolkien as wacky detective Lubbock. Goddard had been a huge fan of famed comics legend Jack Kirby, and later stated that the entire storyline he helped write had been inspired by the classic Fantastic Four Doctor Doom epics, as well as DC's The New Gods. He petitioned Canon Films to allow him to hire Kirby to be a conceptual artist and production designer for the film, but was denied. Though the story elements remain in the script, Conan the Barbarian's William Stout was hired as production designer instead and tried to bring a metal fantasy aesthetic to the picture through the armor and set pieces. Legendary Star Wars artist Ralph McQuarrie was brought in early on to do some concept work for the film, though most of which was unfortunately not brought to fruition. Richard Edlund and Boss Film Studios handled visual effects, including pyrotechnics, practical rigs, and laser blasts. Costume designer Julie Weiss was brought in to help design costumes, including Skeletor's complex design that featured extensive makeup, prosthetic appliances, and a skull mask that limited his movement and vision. Though you could hardly tell because Langella brought it. Most of the Earth sequences were filmed in Southern California, while Castle Grayskull's interiors were constructed using 2 connected sound stages. Connected with matte paintings to cover the walkway between them. Though we've constantly mentioned Canon's lack of budget, the film still was a risky expenditure for the studio, at a, for them, high cost of somewhere between $17 and $22 million. This left the studio concerned throughout filming and keeping a tight eye on production, which of course slowed things down and annoyed the hell out of everyone. Mattel also kept butting in as they remained constantly involved, worried that the film would do anything to sully the image of their cash cow toy line. According to producer Edward Pressman, the production struggled because of its first-time director, Goddard, and Mattel kicking the can down the road for 3 years because they were afraid to dirty the face of their most successful product. By the time the ball got rolling, toy sales had declined and the project was no longer a hot commodity. Goddard also claimed that Mattel didn't pay their part of production costs on time and delayed shooting further. Cannon even allegedly shut down filming before the movie was complete, and Goddard says he had to pay out of his own pocket to finish the film weeks later, with a skeleton crew consisting mostly of himself, Dolph Lundgren, and Frank Langella. Goddard also claims that his original ending was so emotionally powerful that preview audiences openly wept, but that the studio demanded he shortened it. The director, who you do not want to Google, was also unhappy with the result of Lundgren's speaking lines and campaigned to have him dubbed over by another actor. Lundgren was, as previously mentioned, no fool and had a contract stipulation that kept Goddard from doing so and afforded him at least 3 tries to dub it on his own. They still came out super awkward, but at this point, we were in Fucketsville. The other sounds of Masters of the Universe came out quite wonderful and were provided by composer Bill Conti, famous for his unforgettable scores in films like Rocky and The Karate Kid. But an epic score couldn't save a He-Man flick that featured its main character spending most of its running time away from the action, and awkwardly soothing Courtney Cox. Shitshow aside, Masters of the Universe still had to release in theaters, and when it did, it wasn't the response anyone had envisioned. The film released in August of 1987, and despite the brand recognition, and canon weirdly promising the Star Wars of the 80s, though Star Wars itself was thriving well into the 80s, came in 3rd place on its opening weekend. The film would accrue just over $17 million in box office revenue by the time its run came to an end. This, alongside the box office tragedy known as Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, which released the same year, spelled disaster for the future of canon. The critical response wasn't much better. Masters was dubbed a complete and total misfire by most, a Conan and Star Wars ripoff that miscast its most important character and failed to understand what the toys and animated shows had promised. Langella, though, was widely praised for his great performance as Skeletor. Despite the wackiness that surrounded the film and its disappointing release, a sequel was announced at the 1987 Cannes Film Festival. Lundgren, who would later describe his He-Man role as the least favorite of his entire career, refused to come back for obvious reasons. He was to be replaced by surfer Laird Hamilton in a flick to be directed by Nemesis director Albert Pune with a minuscule $2 million budget. Instead, the film was axed due to Cannon deciding not to pay Mattel, who hated the script anyway, a licensing fee. The sets and costumes created were later used in Jean-Claude Van Damme's Cyborg, a much better use of them. As always, however, the box office and budget don't tell the final tale of a film's hero's journey. Masters of the Universe was no doubt a huge swing and a miss when it comes to the IP it was supposed to immortalize, but it's still a staple of a lot of late 80s and early 90s memories, and a joy to experience in all of its campy awkwardness for many who witnessed it over and over again as kids. There's something whimsical and entertaining about just how weird this entire fever dream of a movie is. At the end of the day, there are very few films like it in the world. For better or worse, this weird-ass movie is one of one that has to be witnessed to be believed. It's a callback to not only the odd era of canon films and the 80s, but of a time when fantasy worlds had to be built by hand instead of on a computer. Despite its shortcomings, the franchise still managed to stay alive enough in the hearts of the world to beckon a new shot at the property with 2026's upcoming Masters of the Universe. We'll see how that one goes, but for now, that's what the happened to Masters of the Universe. Until we meet again.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.